Hi, good evening for Slovenes, good afternoon for Americans. My name is Aleš Nitzel. My guest tonight is after a while, after a couple of months, Dr. E. Michael Jones. He was a guest on my other channel, the channel that got erased on YouTube, and he's debuting on this new channel. So, Dr. E. Michael Jones, it's a pleasure as always. Thanks for accepting my invitation.
You're welcome, Alex. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. So, Dr. Jones, as I told you before before the start of the stream, I one of my friends sent me the link to your article at On's review, and I couldn't read it for a while. Now I opened it a couple of minutes before the start, and I wasn't able to read it. And I would really love for you to tell our audience a little bit about this article called Germania delenda. It's about the Nord Stream pipeline, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it's a big story, and it's being suppressed in all of the Western mainstream media. They admitted that it happened, and then the story just dropped, and it was replaced by things like the Iranian hijab protests, which are CIA operations, and we're supposed to think about that, and that's a feel-good story for Western feminists, so they get a lot of press for that, but nothing on the Nord Stream thing. This is significant because it's immediately after it happened, virtually everybody in the blogosphere was in agreement that the Americans had done it. At that point, early on, the former prime minister of Poland, a former defense minister of Poland, Sikorski, posted a picture of the bubbles coming up out of the Baltic, and he said, "Thank you, USA." So this kind of let the cat out of the bag. He did that immediately. It's the problem when you have immediate communications possibilities. And that was before the CIA released its own story, which is basically that Russia did it. Uh, this made no sense whatsoever, that Russia would blow up its own pipeline. But that's the story. And the mainstream media are again losing credibility in this. So there's a lot of discussion back and forth. The main discussion at the beginning was the fact that Russia did, trying to convince people that Russia did it. All the people on the internet are saying, no, the United States did it. So you have that split again. But there's a bigger picture here. And I think that's why it got suppressed, because now this is, if the United States did it, the United States conducted an act of terrorism against its main ally in Europe. It attacked Germany. And there's a plausibility to this thing, not just because of immediate circumstances. The whole history of Anglo-American foreign policy is based on something called the Mackinder thesis, which states that whoever controls the Eurasian landmass controls the world. So any attempt on the part of the states of the Eurasian landmass to come together is seen as a threat to the interests of the Anglo-American empire. And one of the biggest threats would be if Germany were ever to unite with Russia. And that is precisely what has happened because of the pipeline. So Nord Stream 2, it took years to build it. The United States has been saying all along that they were going to destroy it, that they're not happy. As soon as the attack happened, videos of Biden saying, if a Russia invades, we're going to take out the pipeline. At this point, everyone's saying, well, how can you do that? He says, don't worry, we'll do it. We'll take it out. Victoria Nuland said the same thing. Victoria Nuland said the same thing. There has been consensus in Congress, bipartisan consensus that they don't want Russia linking up with Germany because it poses a threat to American hegemony over the entire world. So this is a reckless act, a completely reckless act that I think is going to have the exact opposite effect of what they've intended. because now what you're seeing, what the Germans are seeing, is that America is waging war on Germany. The whole point of this war in the Ukraine, from the mainstream media point of view, is Russia started it and we're defending Ukraine against Russia. The real story is that the United States once again has lured Germany and Russia into a mutually destructive war. First example was World War I. Even World War II was exactly this. One of the big questions in World War II is, why did the Americans take so long to invade Europe? They were postponing the invasion until they postponed it all the way until June of 1944. The Soviets were complaining, but the strategy behind it was clear. We wanted Germany and Russia to destroy each other because they were the two main threats to American hegemony, and we were going to walk in after they had both exhausted both of their armies and fighting with each other. Now, when the United States defeated Germany, what we had was a concerted effort to make sure that Germany never did this again, okay? And the plan was known as the Morgenthau Plan, named after the Jewish Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury under Roosevelt. Okay, the plan was the deindustrialization of Germany. That was the publicly stated plan. Now, if you deindustrialize Germany, there are going to be certain consequences. And the consequences are going to be that Germany will not be able to feed its own people, because Germany cannot produce enough food for the population that lives on that territory. So the public statement, the exoteric statement was, we're going to deindustrialize, but the esoteric hidden grammar was, Germania delenda est, Germany must just be destroyed. Or as one Jew wrote, Theodor Kaufmann wrote a book called Germany Must Perish. The Jews have never given up on this plan. Okay, so the Morgenthau Plan comes into effect. It's made the official policy, and over the winter of 1946-47, German citizens were on the brink of starvation, mass starvation. It's called das Hungerjahr. Some people call it der Hungerwinter. And this was at a time when the Allied armies had warehouses full of food. They were deliberately keeping this from the Germans. The other part of the story is Eisenhower was a major contributor to this plan. He was there in England at the time, or in the summer of 1944, when Morgenthau and his assistant Harry Dexter White came up with the plan, and he imposed it on his own by starving German soldiers to death. It's called the story is called the Rheinwiesenlager. The camps along the floodplain or the Rhine meadows, where basically Eisenhower captured large numbers of German soldiers, refused to declare that they were prisoners of war, so he didn't have to follow the Geneva Conventions, and simply put them out in the field, surrounded them with a fence, gave them no food, no water, and no shelter. And guess what? Hundreds of thousands of those people died. Bach says, who wrote the book on it in the 1990s, Bach said it was 1.5 million. It's the question, you can get into hung up on how many people died, but the main point here is that it was deliberate starvation of a captive German population, in this instance soldiers, and the Morgenthau Plan was the deliberate starvation of the German people, because this is Jewish vengeance. And there were people in the Roosevelt administration who were saying this. They were calling it Semitic vengeance. It turned out at this point to be a battle between the Treasury Department, which was all Jews, run by Jews, staffed by Jews, and the State Department, which was the WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant elite, and residual Christians who felt that this was not Christian behavior. Patton was part of that. Patton was appalled. General Patton was appalled at the way the Germans were being treated. He was appalled at the special treatment the Jews were given. Germans were driven out of their homes and they were handed over to Jews. He was determined to come back and do something about it politically, and he was determined to run for political office. And then he was murdered. It was supposed to be an accident, but he was murdered to eliminate him. And the war hero who did become president at that point was Dwight D. Eisenhower, largely with the help of the psychological warfare establishment. So this is the plan. Eventually, the United States had to back away from their own plan because the people in the State Department knew that if we keep this up, the Germans are going to want to welcome the Soviet army with open arms. Better the Soviet army than starving to death under the Americans and their Jewish executioners. And so they pulled back. They instituted the Marshall Plan. But that just changed. It was the idea never left them that the German people had to be punished. It was just a different means of punishing. And this was known as the era of social engineering. Right after the currency reform in 1948, the country now has money. The country is flooded with pornography, and you have the campaign to corrupt the morals of the German people. So again, Morgenthau mentions specifically the Ruhr Valley, which is the center of German industry. That's coal. He's saying, well, wait a minute. How you can't remove the coal from the Ruhr? You can dismantle the factories. That was part of the plan. What are we going to do about the coal? Well, he proposed the ethnic cleansing of the Ruhr Valley. No German would be allowed to live in the Ruhr Valley. It will be handed over to the administration of another country, France, Holland, maybe something like that. This is the plan. It never changed. Germany was now with different means. Germany, because of social engineering, is going to become a vassal state of the United States of America. And they were kind of brainwashed into thinking that the Americans liberated them when the Americans were basically enslaving them. A repeat of this where these two things came together was a film of the early 70s, Las Juckenkumpel. It's set in the Ruhr Valley. Now all these guys are working there in the factory. It's about coal miners in the Ruhr Valley. It was based on a novel, which was a serious novel, but it got turned into a film, a pornographic film by a German, an Austrian who had been captured by the British and spent time in British captivity interviewing Germans. So he's working for MI5. He goes back and makes this pornographic film, which is basically to corrupt the morals of the workforce. We're still trying to destroy the workforce and prevent Germans from accessing their own energy. Okay, now we have, what's the culmination of this plan? Did they ever give it up? No, they never gave it up. So what's the latest attempt, or let's say the next to latest attempt? The Green Party. The Green Party has been carrying out the deindustrialization of Germany. Well, that's not a coincidence. They're the pawns of the people who are controlling Germany, and they're just trying to do it by different means. So the Greens are now in power. You have someone like Annalena Baerbock, who says we're going to fight in the Ukrainian war no matter what the German voters think. Well, wait a minute. This is a strange thing for a politician to say, that you don't care what the voters think. Well, this is exactly the situation in Germany. The Greens are working for someone else. They are not working for the German people. They are working for the deindustrialization. And I see a clear line of continuity here between the Morgenthau Plan all the way up to the present. And then suddenly, the Germans are going to open Nordstream 2, and suddenly the war breaks out. And the first thing the Germans do is shut down their own energy connection with Russia. This is suicidal. And then that causes demonstrations in Germany. The people are upset, and the demonstrations are putting severe pressure on the SPD Green government, because now it's simply a political decision. They could simply say, okay, you're right. Stop the demonstrations. We'll make peace with Russia. The Communist Party has a platform, raus aus der NATO und Frieden mit Russland. Get out of NATO and make peace with Russia. It's the only political party that has a rational platform in Germany right now. So the pressure's there. And suddenly what happens? The United States comes sensing the pressure, sensing that the red-green coalition is about to collapse. They blow up the pipeline. And now it's removed from the political process. Now, Eugippius is a German who comments on this type of stuff. He said that the Green Party was in on this attack because first of all, it took the political pressure off them. They can just say, well, there's nothing we can do. And also it accomplished their goal, which is basically deprive Germany of energy. I don't know whether they're crazy or not. I'd have to talk to each one individually, but it is a suicidal foreign policy to do that. So finally, to bring it up to date, it turns out the Bloomberg report, and Bloomberg says they screwed up. Whoever did it, whether it was America or America's proxies, they screwed up, and there's one pipeline still left intact. So now we have a completely new ball game again over the past probably 48 to 72 hours. Now it is a political decision again. Now it's the green red coalition is now subject once again to political pressure. If the people take to the streets, they can simply demand turn on the pipeline. There's one of them that's still left. That is leading. But now what has changed is it has become inescapable now. It's an inescapable conclusion that the United States is waging war on Germany. You cannot dispute this fact anymore. And so even the most brainwashed German, and believe me, there are plenty of Germans who have been brainwashed. You're talking about generations of social engineering on the German people. Even the most brainwashed German has to wake up to the fact that the United States is not our ally. This is a war where both Russia and Germany are supposed to destroy each other, leave everything flattened on the ground, wreck both economies, and then the United States will step in and take over. That is the United States goal. And it became clear in the immediate aftermath. Blinken comes on, our Secretary of State, who happens to be a Jew. I'm sure that's pure coincidence. He comes on and says, oh, this is a moment of great opportunity. Well, opportunity for whom?
For whom?
Well, it's opportunity for America to sell them liquefied natural petrol gas. Well, it turns out that Habeck, Robert Habeck, who is the jack of all, he runs the whole operation over there. He's got two offices. He just before this happens, he's announcing, wait a minute, the Americans are gouging us. They're engaging in price gouging. The price that America is charging for liquefied natural gas is astronomical, and it's going to bankrupt the German government. So even the Green Minister of Finance has to admit that Americans are waging war on the Germans. Now, when is this going to kick in? When is there going to be some type of rational response to this type of threat, this open aggression? If you go on Twitter, I hate Twitter, but if you go on Twitter, there are hashtags now. One of them is Sanktionen gegen die USA, sanctions against the United States. And another one is Kriegserklärung, or declaration of war. These are the Germans who now see clearly that America is the aggressor and that Germany is the victim, not just Russia, but Germany as well.
How long has America or United States of America been an euphemism for Israel too? You mentioned that there used to be some conflicts between the WASP administrations and Jewish administrations in different cabinets, sort of say. But how long has it been that there is no WASP or Catholic counterbalance in American administration at all? It seems that it's been for a while now that America is basically really only an euphemism for Jewish super state or something like that.
Yeah, well, as I said, at that moment, at the end of World War II, there was a big battle between the State Department, which was WASP. You had to go to in order to get into CIA, you had to go to Yale, or specifically Yale. Yale was the feeder school for the CIA, and that was WASP at that time. In the 1950s, it was WASP. It wasn't Jewish. But over this period of time, the Jewish influence increased. After World War II, you had people like Herbert Hoover, former President Herbert Hoover, who would specifically invoke Christianity as the American religion, and that say that it's not Christian to starve your enemy to death. And he and other people were talking about Semitic vengeance. Patton used the term. It was widely used, and it basically led to the fact that once Roosevelt died, Morgenthau lost his influence on the government. Harry Truman was not going to go along with this, and Morgenthau pushed his luck, and Harry Truman said, if you don't like it, leave. And Morgenthau left, and that was the end of it, and there was a return to the WASP hegemony. That lasted, I would say, until the 70s. Now, the crucial turning point would have been 1965, when the Jews broke the production code. The Jews in Hollywood broke the production code, and this gave them unlimited access to the mind of the American people without Catholic influence. Okay, now, as I said before, Slovenians should understand this. America is a country with 3 ethnic groups based on 3 religions. It was just like Yugoslavia: Protestant, Catholic, Jew. Yugoslavia, Serb, Croat, and Muslim. It's the same thing. And nobody understands this because the racial narrative has been imposed over that. And that is the government narrative. And that's the basis for social engineering. But it's really Protestant, Catholic, and Jew. And over the period of this time, the WASP elite started to lose its influence because the Jews controlled the media. And whoever controls the media controls the mind. And so I would say the turning point came in the late 70s. Nelson Rockefeller and John D. Rockefeller both died in 1978. They were kind of the leading WASP family. They both died. At around the same time, Woody Allen is being featured on the cover of Time magazine as a great American filmmaker. No, he's not an American. He's a Jewish filmmaker. But at that point, nobody was talking this way. Okay, and then the next step is the Reagan administration. Reagan is running for president, and this is Midge Decter. She's the wife of Norman Podhoretz, and she wrote a memoir and saying how all the Jews were shocked when the Reagan administration invited Jews in to become an integral part of the Republican Party. Well, as Father Hesburgh at Notre Dame said, if you let the Jews in, they take over, and that's exactly what happened to the conservative movement. It was a kind of a CIA operation from the beginning with William Buckley and Russell Kirk, but it was a Christian CIA operation. And then once the neoconservatives come to power with the Reagan administration, they define conservatism as being pro-Israel. And so one of the founders of Russell Kirk is one of the founders of the conservative movement. He stands up as a speech at the Philadelphia Society, a conservative organization. He said, Tel Aviv is not the capital of America. Well, the Jews were outraged, and they expelled the founder of conservatism from his own movement. They had that much power by the time of the Reagan administration, and it's increased exponentially. So whenever you have Jews in power, they're going to have a war. And so 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. How did the American citizens benefit from that? The only beneficiary was Israel. And Israel did not benefit either, because ultimately what you did by taking out a Ba'athist dictator like Saddam Hussein is you handed over the country over to the Shia militia, and you created basically the crescent, the Shia crescent that goes all the way from Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Hezbollah, and then down to the Palestinians. So it brought about it cost $1 trillion. It brought about the exact opposite of what these people wanted. So sooner or later, we're all going to have to wake up to this fact, and we're going to have to start drawing the consequences. And I think the first place it's going to happen is Germany. They were the main victims of World War II. They are the main victims of social engineering. They are the main power in Europe. They are the economic driving force behind European prosperity. And if the United States takes out America, all of Europe is going to suffer.
You mentioned the communists in Germany having the commonsensical stance towards the states of affairs. Do you think that it's possible that the Germans took over a communist party, or do you think that we have to be at least somewhat skeptical towards this communist because there are probably Jews behind them too? What I wanted to ask you is, I don't know if you noticed, but the left academia sort of Guardian, New York Times reading left academia, science, the so-called science believing left academia, they used to have this stance towards America. For example, Hussein, Gaddafi, Assad, Iran, Chavez, whenever a leader wins popularity in his own country and frees them from the globalist financial system run by Americans of no particular ethnicity, this is cynical, of course, the West attacks them as tyrants and fabricates atrocity propaganda to win support for invasion and occupation. Of course, the same academia has a different stance toward 40s Germany. This is the only exception. They don't believe in the same narrative. Um, our school books and mainstream media tell us that Germany of the 40s is plain evil, and there's no such involvement of America in triple brackets, sort of say, as they believed it about Chavez, Hussein, Gaddafi, Assad, Iran, and so forth and so forth. But this same academia, left academia, Guardian, and New York Times reading academia, has lately been pro NATO, pro America, and it bedazzles me. Do you have any explanation about this? Have you noticed the same thing? They have been purporting this narrative that Russia took down the Nord Stream pipeline. For example, the left leaning academia that wouldn't do anything like this couple of years ago. Do you have any explanation about this?
Yeah, the left changed. There was a changing of the guard. The man who symbolized this the best was Michel Foucault, who was came from France at a time when the time of the revolution of 1968, and he expected this revolution to continue. The left movement there reached a point where they had to go into terrorism. If they didn't go into terrorism, as the Baader-Meinhof gang had done in Germany, they were going to be co-opted. And the man who did the co-opting of the left was Foucault. So the deal is basically, we'll change, we're going to talk about economics and capitalism. No, now we're all going to talk about sex. This is the new left of the 1960s. And basically Foucault, at this point, he's teaching at Berkeley. He starts teaching Austrian school economics. This is libertarianism. This is the exact opposite of communism and everything that the left believe. But the reason that he can do this is because the West is now the guarantor of sexual license, sexual liberation, and in his case, sodomy. So basically, we won't protest your economic system as long as you give us unlimited sexual liberation. That was Foucault's Faustian pact, and that is the left now. The main force driving the Democratic Party right now is women who have had abortions. Nancy Pelosi is now saying that Biden is the worst president in American history. He's totally corrupt. He's totally incompetent. He's bringing about the exact opposite of what America should be doing, even the American empire. And she's saying that the Democrats are going to retain control of the House simply because of abortion. That is the fruit. That is the political mobilization of sexual deviance. All of those women. I saw it in Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to a private Catholic school. All of those, they had the nuns, orders of nuns had their own private schools. All of the nuns became feminist over the period of the 1970s. That led to the sexual liberation of all of the girls who were going to school there. That led to sexual acting out. That led to pregnancy, and the pregnancy led to abortion. And as soon as you get an abortion, you become a Jew. You think like a Jew because abortion is a Jewish sacrament. That's what the Jews are saying right now after the overturn of Roe versus Wade. And the main way you act like a Jew is by voting like a Jew. And that's the Democratic Party. That is the transformation that took place in the left over this period of time.
Was it ever the case that the left was let me put it this way, minimalistically nationalistic? Was the left ever faithful to its indigenous nation?
Well, now we're getting into a situation where I have to ask you, what do you mean by the left? So if you go to the 1930s, the fundamental issue in the 1930s all over America and Europe is wages. It's unemployment. It's the people working in the factories. America is the powerhouse industrial nation in the world. And place like Detroit is the headquarters of America's industrial might. You have Henry Ford symbolizing this. Now, is Henry Ford left or right? Well, obviously he's a factory owner, which means he's a capitalist, which means he's obviously right. But on the other hand, he's trying to keep America out of the war. And the indigenous political movement at this time was America first. Now, you could say, okay, unions were a crucial battleground in the 1930s. The church came out in favor of unions, both in Rerum Novarum, 1893, I believe, and then Quadragesimo Annum, 1933. In both of those, they are supporting the working man. Well, does that mean that the church is now the left? Well, I don't know. It depends on what you mean by left now. But these people were the backbone of the Democratic Party, the unions. The union was the main mobilizing device for Catholics in the United States of America. Virtually every politician came out of some type of union background. Now, that changed in 1968, and you can watch a film now about the Democratic Convention of 1968, which is basically when the Jews took over the Democratic Party. That's what it's got that Sacha Baron Cohen is starring in this movie, turning the Chicago 7 or whatever they are, Chicago 8 into heroes now. It came down to the floor of the convention, where you have Abraham Ribicoff, who's the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, a Jew from Connecticut, talking about the police in Chicago who were trying to fight the demonstrators, keep them out of the hall, calling them Nazis, Nazi stormtroopers. Well, you're playing the Holocaust card now. And that is the fundamental myth of the American empire, which was created immediately after World War II. And now basically, anytime you want to win an argument, you say that your opponent is a Nazi, unless it's the Ukraine and the Azov Brigade, in which case they're good Nazis. They're good Nazis. So their confrontation is there. You can watch it in 68. There's Richard Daley. Abraham Ribicoff has the platform. He's up there with the microphone. He's calling them Nazi stormtroopers. And Richard Daley is down with the delegation, the Illinois delegation, yelling out, "Go back to Connecticut, you fucking kike." You can see him mouthing this. This is the ethnic conflict that I've been talking about. It came out right then and there. There's always this ethnic conflict in America, and it was the Catholic versus the Jews over who's going to control the Democratic Party. Well, the Catholic ethnics were expelled, and they all voted for Ronald Reagan, and that's how Ronald Reagan got elected. It was that guy who wrote the emerging, forget the guy's name, the emerging Republican majority, wrote the book about it, saw it coming. That's led to the situation we're in today.
Lately, couple of friends or colleagues or however I should call them have tried to persuade me that I'm wrong about the Jews and I'm wrong about ethnicity as being the main spiritus movens in the majority of things that happen in the world. So, for example, they've been sending me some articles about that it's not the Jews that lead the world, it's the Freemasons, or that it's actually a Queen of England or now a King of England. Do you think that these are only euphemisms for the truth, which is what you've been telling us till now, that there's basically all about, or at least the majority of things, states of affairs, at least in America, which also have effects on Europe and so forth, are based on ethnic conflicts? What's your opinion on this, Doctor?
Well, I remember our friend Tom Sunich calling in. Is Tom Sunich white? Are the Croats white? I think this is crazy. You think that black-white, the racial narrative, is going to explain the history of Croatia? I'm sorry, the history of Yugoslavia? Well, you're going to have to spend a long time explaining that. I'm saying that United States is Yugoslavia. And Tom Sunich is saying Yugoslavia is the United States. He's trying to superimpose this ridiculous racial narrative where it does not apply. There's one place where the racial narrative applies, and that's in the southern states of America, because they imported large numbers of African slaves to work on cotton plantations. That's part of that history. It's not part of the history of the rest of the world. It's got nothing to do with the rest of the world. Are there ethnic groups in the rest of the world? Well, yeah. Do you speak Slovenian? That is the basis of your ethnicity. You can't get away from this. You can go to Tanzania. There's 76 different ethnic groups in Tanzania because there's 76 different languages. Okay? They're all dark. They're all black, if you want to talk about that way, but it's a meaningless term. So what you have is, in 1954, the government tried to impose this racial narrative superimpose it over the ethnic narrative. And because they had the power of the government behind them, they succeeded to a large extent. But to talk about Europeans, what are you going to do? If you're talking about Freemasonry, I mean, read my book, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. Was Freemasonry a power in Europe? Yes, of course it was, in the 18th century, and maybe into the 19th century. But once you had the Russian Revolution, well, that's the end of Freemasonry. It wasn't the end of Jewish influence because the Bolsheviks were Jews. So these are the categories that perdure, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Freemasonry is a word that people use because they're afraid to say the word Jew. And there are a lot of people out there who are afraid to say the word Jew. Cardinal Archbishop, the Archbishop of Philadelphia wrote an article in First Things talking about secularizing activists. Took over the courts and imposed banned school prayer. That wasn't they were Jews who did. The American Jewish Committee, Leo Pfeffer, it was a Jewish operation from beginning to end, but apparently Archbishop Chaput is afraid to say the word Jew.
What was the word he used? Secularist activist.
Secularizing activists.
Secularizing activists.
And that was in First Things. First Things was a conservative magazine that was created with Jewish money. It was more Norman Podhoretz and Midge Decter who created it as the opposition to the Rockford Institute, which was Middle America, America First to some extent.
Some people even say that it's not the Jews, it's the Jesuits.
Look, if you're talking about Who is controlling the Vatican at this moment in time? It's the Jesuits. There's no doubt about it. Okay. If you ask me where the Jews, who controls the Jesuits, the answer is very simple. It's George Soros. George Soros gives millions of dollars to the Jesuits, and the Jesuits are the proxy warriors who control the Vatican, at least, and to a large extent, the Catholic Church, in the interest of George Soros and the Jews. Read America Magazine. It's their official magazine. Yeah, they're rootless cosmopolitans. That's right. That was Stalin's word. Even Stalin was afraid to say the word Jew.
The great Stalin, yeah.
So tell me what the Slovenians are thinking now. You had the Italian Meloni, a kind of nationalist reaction to Draghi, the Goldman Sachs guy. Now you have a kind of nationalist government in Italy. What's the feeling in Slovenia?
Well, Slovenia doesn't think anything. Slovenia is a vassal state of America or whatever, or Germany, which is a vassal state of America. The mainstream media doesn't think at all. They just take over the scripts they get from the Americans with triple brackets and so forth. And probably the owners and also the majority of journalists in Slovenia and politicians are um, are either Jewish thinking or Jews themselves. Although it's a little bit harder in Slovenia because we haven't been aware about the power of the Jews at all here. We always talked about the power of the Ashkenazi Jews in Poland and Germany and so forth, but in Slovene language there hasn't been enough um, motivation for people to research Slovene names and so forth. We don't know um, how Slovene Jews, crypto Jews, Catholicized or secularized Jews, what kind of names they have, and then you talk to people, and then you find out during the debate with them, they tell you themselves when I'm a Jew, I'm a or something like that, and then of course afterwards they call you an anti-Semite, just saying that the majority of Bolsheviks were Jewish, and that we haven't done any research in Slovenia and ex-Yugoslavia, but it probably is also like that with Slovene Bolsheviks, Slovene communists. It's hard to believe that this rural peasant Slovene guys or Croatian guys or Serbian guys with no education at all went to Moscow and got trained there in communism or Bolshevism, and then took over the revolution during the war. It's hard to believe that it's not similar to Soviet Union or Russia in Slovenia. But we don't have any research about Slovene Jews, but it's probably very similar. I don't know. What's your opinion? Probably.
Well,
What's your speculation?
I've already told you what happened to the Catholic population in Philadelphia. The women all became Jews. The minute they partook of the Jewish sacrament, as soon as the woman has an abortion, she thinks and acts like a Jew. Now, obviously, there's a possibility for repentance. You can repent here, but the whole point of the feminist movement was to prevent repentance and organize these people and turn them into a powerful revolutionary force in our society. So you don't have to be a Jew. Look, Ron Unz is a Jew. He publishes my stuff on the Unz Report. It's one of the few places where you can criticize Jews openly. So we have to be sophisticated about this, and we have to talk about the Jewish revolutionary spirit. That's the title of the book. That's an intangible thing. It's not DNA. It doesn't automatically arise out of your DNA. And if you don't have Ashkenazic DNA, you can become a Jew simply by having an abortion. So we have to be sophisticated in dealing with this phenomenon, rather than simply using biological thinking of the sort that invariably involves you in some type of racial superiority.
About Meloni, the new TV of Italia, I do think it's pretty obvious that she's been a member of this Euro-Atlanticistic institutions like Aspen Institute and so forth. She's obviously a Zionist, obviously, although it could be that she's only acting, because you have to act like that if you want to prosper as a politician. But if this is the fact, then what's I don't see that what's in it for the indigenous people of Europe. What's in it if you have to have politicians who have to profess to holy Israel and
Right.
go and
She's the Italian Ron DeSantis.
yeah, probably.
It's very similar to that type of thing. So the speech he gave a very powerful speech right before the election about, we want to be called mother and father. We don't want to be called parent Y or parent X. It was a culture war speech. I know what a culture war speech is. I've been doing it for 40 years now. You know what I mean? I understand the social issues. I understand the importance of sexual issues in politics. But that's not the entire story. And the conservative movement, the neoconservative movement, fastened on, this is the Faustian pact that the neoconservatives made. Okay, the Jew will permit you to be anti-abortion as long as you support the state of Israel. That's the deal. That's Meloni's deal. That is Ron DeSantis's deal. And it's got a limited value. I'm glad she feels that way about these type of things. I'm glad she's against abortion. It's a serious issue. But in order to do it, if you have to get a license from the Jew in order to be pro-life, where is that going to lead you? This is a crisis right now for the right to life movement. It's a crisis because the Jews have come out. 140 Jewish organizations have said abortion is a fundamental Jewish value. And so the local Right to Life organization in South Bend has invited Ben Shapiro to speak. Ben Shapiro is now pretending he's the head of the Right to Life movement. Well, when he comes to South Bend, they're paying him an outrageous amount of money to speak here. Well, it sounds to me now we have a Jewish commissar in charge of the Right to Life movement who's going to tell us how we can be pro-life. LifeSite News in Canada published an article saying in order to be really pro-life, you have to fight anti-Semitism. Well, wait a minute. If you fight anti-Semitism, you're putting power into the hands of the Jews. If you put power in their hands, they will promote abortion. So if you're fighting against anti-Semitism, you're pro-abortion. You're promoting abortion. We have not resolved this conflict yet. That's the only option that's available to people who think that there are 20. It's a crazy idea to say that there are 37 different genders. So they're exploiting that fact.
Yeah. Okay. Our last topic probably it's Iran. Is anything real or truthful about the so-called, I don't know how many of them have we witnessed, but there's been plenty of them about this revolution in Iran, or is this again and again a psyop done by the?
Yeah, it's the CIA. So Iran is being punished because they signed on with the Shanghai agreement. Okay. And so what you have here is the unification of the Eurasian landmass. And also, Iran is now selling drones to Russia. Another reason they should be punished. And so they pulled out, once again, an anti-hijab protest movement. Okay, so it's being orchestrated from without. So the Supreme Leader is right when he says America is behind it. America's obviously behind it. They did the same thing in 2009 when they tried to overthrow the election of President Ahmadinejad for a second term. Okay, that being said, that's not the end of the story. There are serious problems in Iran. And once again, you're being forced with the Iranian people being forced into a situation where they have to choose two equally repugnant alternatives. So do you want CIA feminism, or do you want Islamic fundamentalism? Which is it? They are the only two choices. And this is probably the source of the problem. Now, you've got a group of clergy who are in charge of the country, and they made a serious mistake in 1989, the year that the Ayatollah Khomeini died. His successor, the Ayatollah Khamenei, took office, and he allowed the use of contraception. Big mistake. Okay, contraception is immoral. Their claim is that the ummah, the clergy, are infallible. Well, you just made a big mistake. How do I know it was a big mistake? Because the Ayatollah Khamenei publicly apologized for doing it, said it was the biggest mistake of his career, and he begged Allah for forgiveness. Now, you got these people who are trying to hold on to power, and they've got a basically untenable situation. Because, I mean, I did a long review of Abbas Ahmad's history of Iran, in the May issue of Culture Wars, I believe, in which he said that you've got this constant pendulum swing in Iran. It goes from pro-Westernization, like the Shah, the CIA coup that installed the Shah, and the Westernization comes in, and suddenly everybody hates it because it's morally corrupt, and the women are being morally corrupted, and this leads to the Islamic reaction. And now the Islamic reaction is now from 1979 to the present. We're heading toward 50 years now. You can't keep a revolution going for 50 years. And what the fundamental problem here is that neither Westernization nor the Islamic Republic correspond to the identity of the people, which is Persian. So you've got this missing element in the middle that could unify the country if it weren't constantly being subjected to these attempts to overthrow the government. I think that's the fundamental problem. How do you articulate the golden mean here, the Persian identity, in a way that proposes an alternative to both of those equally extreme alternatives?
It's probably something we could say something similar about the West, or Europe, or the Western world, that we haven't had any debates about women's sexuality at all, but we should have them, shouldn't we? Because as you already said, of course, hijabs are something extreme, but liberalism and feminism are extreme too. So there
Right.
has to be some middle ground about female sexuality, isn't it?
Right. So Europe, Slovenia is in exactly the same situation. Okay. Do you want communism, or do you want American imperialism? You have to choose one or the other, because they are the two big powers. So you were absorbed into a communist country, Yugoslavia, for a while, and then that got overthrown, and now you're absorbed into the American empire. Well, can't you just be Slovenians? How can you be Slovenian? There's one way. There's only one way, and that is to return to the Catholic faith. That is the only solution for Europe right now. The hour is late. especially in Germany. I just said this yesterday to Gemma O'Doherty about Ireland, same type of situation. There is only one solution now, and that is a return to the Catholic faith, because that is the only modus. That is what created Europe in the first place. If it weren't for the Catholic Church, there would be no such thing as Europe, and certainly not the high civilization that you had in Europe. Now, you have all kinds of weird neo-pagans who will dispute this, but it's just preposterous. The key statement here was Civiltà Cattolica in 1890, when the Catholic Church could actually talk about the Jewish question without embarrassment. I mean, the church can't, try to talk to an Austrian bishop about this topic. See how far you get. See how far you get. Okay? So what did they say? The countries of Europe, as long as the countries of Europe implement the principles derived from the French Revolution, they will wait in vain for liberation from the Jews. The whole point of that study was, what was the net result of 100 years of French Revolution, and that France is now prostrate in the hands of the Jews. That's the gist of that. I think it's truer today than it was in 1890, over 100 years ago. That's the only solution. That's the solution for Ireland, certainly the solution for Ireland, which is a more extreme case than Slovenia. The fall of Ireland took place purely because of sexual liberation. And if you want to maybe add debt to that, there are 2 Jewish sacraments, and it completely obliterated Ireland as an independent country. There's only one way back. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly confronted with these equally repugnant alternatives, and you will have no identity. And let's be honest. Let's take an honest look at Germany. The American empire will destroy you. They will destroy you. You can count on it, because Europe is a threat to United States hegemony over the world. And if they perceive it as a threat, they will do everything within their power to destroy you. And the proof of that is what the Americans just did to the Nordstream pipeline. You don't need any more proof than that. That's an attack on every country in Europe, because Germany is the strongest of all of those economies.
Okay, at the end, please tell us something about your new book. You've been promoting it lately.
Yeah, I'm going on a book tour on Sunday. We're leaving for Points West. I give a talk in Chicago. The book is The Dangers of Beauty, the conflict between mimesis and the fine arts, and concupiscence in the fine arts. It's available at culturewars.com. Culturewars.com. Do not do search engines. You will get the Jewish assault on my reputation if you go to the search engine. Go to culturewars.com, because this is the story of the rise of European culture as the most powerful culture in the world, largely beginning with Italian art at the time of Giotto, breaking with the Greek models. I gave this talk to a group of Orthodox people in West Virginia. Interesting discussion we had afterwards. But I mean, basically, you're talking about how the Catholic Church superseded Orthodoxy as the cutting edge of Logos, in this case, the cutting edge of art in the world. So go to culturewars.com. I'd be happy to discuss it. I'll send you a review copy if you like, and we will discuss it. We can discuss it on your program.
Great. Please do send me one last question. One last question, because you do deal with culture wars. You have been dealing with culture wars for so many years now, and it is at least some sort of cultural phenomena. Have you been have you heard about Andrew Tate?
No.
Oh, okay. Then it doesn't make any sense to ask you a question of whether there's a sane Catholic stance on this phenomena. But if you Google him, maybe we can talk about him on the next stream beside other things. Okay, Dr. Jones, it's been a pleasure once again. Thank you for all the facts. It's pretty much incredible what we always get from an hour of a stream with you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for accepting my invitation.
Thanks
Hopefully,
for having me. Thanks for having me.
of course, it's my pleasure. Have a pleasant day. Have a pleasant afternoon. Have a pleasant evening. And thanks to all the viewers and commentators. And take care. Good
Thank you.
night.